Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm going to put this audio in my 150th Journey series, which has turned out to be epic already because of some of these things that are happening. And this brings resolution to, well, just all of it. So here's the audio here. Okay, so just one more thing to resolve about um, the line, boss, I have become better than you. And, the previous, video that they put up there, a gathering that I attended where he, after building an ashram that was, that before that, what they had was, they built Chennai Ashram, and Master's son, Krishna, gave a talk where he talked about how when they built the ashram in Chennai, the mission had already outgrew the meditation hall. So the meditation hall held, maybe 5,000, 6,000, like everybody packed in like sardines. They had these auxiliary wings where you could sit outside, but there was like almost no shade. And like I sat outside sometimes, and it was so hot, pretty much all year. And so the sun would bake down on you. And that was just for Sunday group meditation. On Sunday group meditation, they got, there's 20,000 Abhyasis potentially coming just from Chennai, people traveling from other countries. And so with Charji being there, you could easily get over 5,000 every Sunday. And then at a gathering, it was just, it was a 20-acre ashram, and it really couldn't contain everybody. People staying there, right? So people would rent apartments and things like that. Hotels if they had to. And, the gathering couldn't be there, so they'd go to Tirupur. In Tirupur, they had 100 acres of land that had, some tents and some facilities, but not really much else. And then they bought this land at Tiruvallur, which was about an hour away from Chennai. And the ashram in Tiruvallur was, the ashram in Tirupur was about a mile or two away from the acres of land, right? But they didn't have an ashram that had all the things that the ashram had, in a meditation hall that could hold like 100,000 people for these big gatherings, right? So that was what was happening. So they were building this mega ashram, and they had over 1,000 acres of land. They had houses that were going to be surrounding the ashram. People are going to be buying houses and living in the ashram area. They were going to have schools and, all these things there, and then they could house these big gatherings. The Bandaras that Babaji had talked about so much in whispers and had been talked about for years, that were the centerpiece of the whole organization. Big gatherings. And Daji almost immediately came in and got rid of those. Let's make them localized and only one day a year, is what he said, for the next 2 years. So that's 2016 all the way to 2018. Of course, there was really it was about Charji's birthday. Like, he didn't honor Charji really once on his birthday. Not in any real way. Like 2015, Charji had just died. He couldn't get rid of that one. That was already planned. That was already being, there was, that happened in Tiruvallur. But he, they had this big ashram that they're now using for all this wellness stuff. But we know now that, number one, he was getting rid of the gatherings, which was, not the will of the previous masters or anybody else. Nobody else wanted that. There wasn't one person that said, oh, these big gatherings have to go, right? People would come and volunteer for 16, hours. They would come ahead of time and get the facilities ready. They would come stay at the place where the gathering was happening and put up tents. And there was, some of the decorations that they would put up. Like the Charji's birthday celebration in Tiruvallur, they put up all these flowers and fruit and, greens in front of this tent. It was incredible. Like, we went to a place where we stopped for one day, and they put all these flowers and sand and made these mandalas on the ground. They were like, 10 feet. There was about 5 or 6 of them in the whole area. Like, you walked into the area and you walk through all this beautiful coloring and all this stuff that they had. I mean, I don't know how they even pulled it off, and we only stayed there 5 hours. It wasn't even a gathering. Chargy gave one sitting and left. I mean, the volunteers that would cook in the hot, for 8 hours a day, 16, whatever it was, would cook food for thousands of people, and it was hot as all get out, and like it was 110 degrees, right? So there was that, right? And people loved it. People couldn't get enough of these gatherings, so we would all look forward to them. And he started to downplay them. He said kids can't come to his birthday. I mean, kids can't come. Now he sits there with his grandkids on his lap, and he's written all these books. He's doing the Brighter Minds thing. He's all about kids. He's a kid guy now, But back then he said no kids, and old people had to be accompanied by somebody, which made sense. Some practical things there, because kids were being abandoned by their parents at the gatherings, and old people. One guy, he was, he got lost on the train, because he's lost his mental capacities, right? Because he didn't have the Brighter Minds program, couldn't afford it, Well, they didn't have it, of course, but whatever. But he hadn't done it as a kid, yeah. So his cognitive abilities were breaking down, and so just like that's how silly this whole thing is. But he started changing things right off the bat, because this is the thing, right? We now know this is resolution. So I'm going to put this up on my backup channel for whatever period of time, just so people have it. And then, of course, this is going in a journey series. But we can understand now, boss, I have become better than you, right? The method already is given to us, so let us make use of what is a lot of joy and celebrate our master's birthday. Recognize his failure is fine. His value is fine, but we don't want attributes or values of the great masters. We want to become like them, and with their help, transcend them. It is no insult to the great masters. I keep saying this again and again, that our masters will be happy when we say, boss, I have become better than you. Thank you. Again, it's not for you to judge. You can never say, I have become greater than the master. This is something where, like Lalji might have said that to Babaji. Babaji said he put Kesi Vradachari ahead of himself in the central region, but Kesi Vradachari started thinking of himself as the doer, and he plummeted like a stone, and he went back to the first point. So, he went from the central region ahead of Babaji to the first point because of his, forgetting about what brought him there and not losing gratitude and respect and all these things, right? And, it's not for you to say. You would never say that. A spiritual person would never say, boss, I have become better than you, to his spiritual master. I mean, who would say that in general, right? That's like when you're talking boop to playing sports where you're like, you're beating your dad basketball or something, and you're like talking, smack to him or something. Look, I've been better than you now, So, but it happens where where somebody transcends somebody older than them, right? Gets better than them at something, and saying that is like, you don't need to say it out loud. But in Doji's case, he clearly isn't. He's worse than Chargy at everything, and the mission's a joke, and it's collapsed into depravity and scams and thugs and searching cars for meat and for meat and alcohol and just all of it, right? Fake awards and external validation and all these things. But we now know, in terms of resolution, that he was feeling this way, because this is in 2016. So Chargy passed away at the end of 2014, really 2015, December 20th, I think, of it was a day of just right before the winter solstice in 2014, so around Christmas time. And then, so that's really basically 2015. And so they had one gathering for Chargy at Chargy's, the Tiruvallur ashram that they built. And then Daji came in and immediately changed things and said kids couldn't come. He disappeared like no one knew where he was, like in Chennai, because he, didn't want to be there anymore. He didn't like the people there. They weren't really accepting him because he wasn't Brahmin. And he was, he had houses there. He had a place next to the ashram. So he didn't come back to Chennai. All of us were there, and, he went wherever he was going. I guess he went to the Khan ashram, and I went home for a bit, I don't know, to America, but he, disappeared. Nobody knew where he was, and he was making these changes. and to the structure of the mission. And then 2016 comes around. So this is like the first, we had the flood. So the flood was an epic thing that flooded the headquarters. And he switched the headquarters from Chennai to this new ashram in Hyderabad. That they had, were building this epic ashram with this massive meditation hall that holds, up to like 100,000 people with the auxiliary buildings, right? Biggest meditation hall in the world. And he immediately starts canceling big gatherings, changing the maxims, changing the, name of the system, right? From, all this stuff came from, everything that Babaji did came from his intercommuning with Lalaji and the what they call the divine hierarchy, the spiritual beings, right? It includes Swami Vivekananda and Krishna and Jesus and famous higher developed souls, and some that we don't even know who they were in material life, or if they even lived here on planet Earth. But there's these divine beings who oversee everything that happens on Earth and various places in the spiritual world, and they would dictate to Babaji what need to happen. Mostly it was Lalaji, his master, right? Would say this is what has to happen. We'll call it Saj Marg, the natural path. They give him the emblem. This is what the emblem needs to look like, right? All of these things. And he comes in and he puts it out there and says, come think of a name. And someone says Heartfulness. I think it's this kind of doofus guy from America who's like just, I was talking to this one guy and he said that he brought a friend who wasn't an Abhyasi to meet this guy, because he was living near where this guy was, and he started with the guy's wife, who's sort of famous. But this one guy, he had his own little, show on Facebook, his own little Heartfulness show on Facebook, some Quora thing he had, and he added music to videos, to like doing cleaning with music, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do, because your ears are material. Sound is material, and anything that's material has to be forgotten when you're meditating. So he put in these guided meditations and things. But that guy, that's the guy I think who came up with the name Heartfulness. It's not a hard name to come up with, like it was already out there. Heartfulness already existed, and I was surprised that they did such a good job of glomming it, because it already, Huffington Post had a Heartfulness thing, and there's all this Heartfulness stuff out there, and they ended up grabbing onto that name and using it, which was impressive given what had happened in the past. But again, he was unsanctioned. He was already changing the name. It was Heartfulness in 2016. They're already calling it Heartfulness, and that was supposed to bring in new people who weren't Indian, because Saj Marg was, for Indians Saj Marg is fine, but for Western people and people outside India, like, what is Saj Marg? It's it's not for us. That's not an English, that's not a term we're familiar with. It must be one of these things that's, from India that we're not, So the Heartfulness was supposed to bring in people globally, but then he goes and joins all these radical groups like the RSS and things like this. So it's a failure because, he's not bringing in new people from all over the world. It's just all Indian celebrities, Indian politicians. He's just now leaving India years later. And so we know that he thought he was better. Boss, I have become better than you. Early on, like before Charji died. And Charji said, you can't exceed your master. So we already knew this clown was going to do this. So this is all resolution. We know where this started. We know what was going on inside of Daji's internal world. He thought he exceeded Charji. Whatever problem he has with Charji, he wanted to erase him from the mission right off the bat. It confirms what I've been told, that he told people that to destroy Charji's books right after Charji died. Like, so he already was, he was pretending and, sitting there and crying, fake crying, when Charji announced him as a successor, crying when Charji said that he was going to be vice president, and he couldn't read because he was so broken up, that Charji was leaving, and, just faking all these things. And then as soon as Charji passed away, he gave it like a year, and then he started implementing these things, right? And so we know, like, this was already there. Like, he already thought he was, boss, I have become better than you before. Whatever his, feeling is, he thinks he's better than Charji. When Charji was still alive, he thought he exceeded him and, transcended him. and we know that that's just goofy. And so this puts it all to rest. Like, whenever you need something resolved, it's resolved. It just resolves the whole doooji dilemma, that he thought he was better. Nobody can deny that this is not a spiritual thing. Boss, I have become better than you. Not one Abhyasi can, they will, but if they know anything about the literature, anything about the sort of guru culture, and not, in the Saj Marg sense, real masters, that you can't transcend them, right? And if you do, it's up to them to tell you, right? Because Babaji was, in many ways transcended Lalaji in terms of, but Lalaji brought him through everything. So, how could he say he transcended him, right? Like Babaji was, the humility has to be there, and you have to be grateful. And knowing that without the system, without the master, and without this energy, there's no that you did it. I have become better than you. No, like you there's no I in that, right? The becoming, better, which, again, that's a arrogant statement. I mean, that shouldn't exist either. But becoming better, it's not that you become better. It's that your ego is minimized, and you humble yourself, and you allow the divinity to flow through you, and you become a conduit. There's no I in that. There's, God working through you. There's no I, there's no me. That's no spiritual person. There's no, when you're doing that, it's ego, right? When I do that, when anybody does it, it's ego, right? And the master can't do that. The master has to completely surrender their ego and allow the divinity to flow through and always make the right decisions. And this is why doooji is sucked, because he's, he thinks he's whatever he's doing, he's, at that time when he was walking around, it's this time where you can see he's got a swagger, and he's got a, attitude, like, oh my God, how great I am, the way he just looks and things at the camera and these things, where he's, feeling himself. And this is where it all comes from. So this is the fall of Saj Marg into, the Heartfulness cult. It comes from his, boss, I have become better than you. Like, this is his inner world, what he thinks inside. He revealed it. And, there it is. So like I said, this is, I'm glad I found this, because, I wasn't looking for it, but it's resolution. We don't, it wasn't like something happened. Whatever happened before Charji died. And that doooji going into this already had, it had already fallen, in a sense, because of this. No matter what work they did to him and how high, putting him in the central region and charging his points and doing all the spiritual work, with that kind of mantra, boss, I have become better than you, an attitude, and, thinking that he's somehow, the chosen one or whatever, and then trying to erase the, the old system and create a new one, where he's the founder, something better, when he already had a perfect system, and getting rid of the gatherings and dishonoring the masters and his master completely, and just erasing him from the system, all this stuff. Boss, I have become better than you. And that's his, that's his downfall. There's no, we don't have to look any farther, and all these people who are following him should say, oh, wow, like, I just, this stuff was given to me because I didn't want it. Like, I didn't, but it's, we now, for all of us who see it or know what's going on, and there's, whatever it is, they're not watching that channel, like those people. doooji Truther doesn't, I don't think I sent him some stuff, but I don't think he's even looking at it. And so, I sent him the things, so he can do with it what he wants. But that's it. Like, that's it. Boss, I have become better than you. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to put this up on a separate, my backup channel, and just as some resolution, and I can stop talking about this. And then I'll complete this journey series segment. And it's, there's a resolution there. We all now know that this is like part of the origin story of the fall of Saj Marg into heartfulness. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the apocalypse, and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day, and be grateful.